Behind the Scenes with Anthony Breznican.
This is a conversation about movies by people who love movies.
From the smallest indie films to the Marvel Universe and beyond.
We're going to be talking to actors, actresses, directors, producers, everybody involved in the making of the best movies of the year.
There's always more to the story than what ends up on the big screen. Now, here's your host, Anthony Breznican.
Welcome to Behind the Scenes. I am Anthony Breznican, senior writer with Entertainment Weekly. Thanks for joining us, and on today's program, the show must go on. Or should it? What happens to a movie when there is a death in the midst of filming? Often, in tribute, a crew rallies to salvage the project and complete the final work on behalf of the person who died. But in at least one high-profile case right now, the crew is doing the exact opposite, trying to stop a movie that led to the death of one of their own. But first, a look back. It's March 1994, almost exactly 20 years ago, in Durango, Mexico. At some point in the middle of the night, John Candy passes away from a heart attack. The comedian was there to shoot the Western comedy Wagons East, and although he had finished much of his work on the film, it wasn't complete, not by any means, and there were at least two scenes when the film finally came out that had to be completed by splicing footage of Candy from earlier sequences and footage shot for the movie. In other cases, a look-alike was used and dressed and made up to look like him. In other cases, they used a sound-alike to record dialogue that Candy himself never got the chance to speak. And if you watch the movie now, and not many people do, it holds a very, very low rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It's obvious where the repair work had to be done. It really sticks out. But at the time, this was heralded as a seamless salvation of his performance. It was state-of-the-art visual effects, trailblazing movie magic, the same sort of trickery used to blend Tom Hanks into historical footage in Forrest Gump, which won the Best Picture Oscar that year. And for better or worse, it preserved the final performance of a beloved comedian, probably who will be remembered for much better films. Now, a year earlier, 1993, when River Phoenix died in the middle of filming the drama Dark Blood, there was no saving that movie. It was scrapped completely. There was he had filmed a lot of it, not enough to finish it, and the insurance company that backed the film said, we're just going to shut it down. And it wasn't until this year that the movie was finished in some form by the director who actually just used narration to describe what was missing from the project. So, in a sense, he's just screening footage, not really a finished film. But today, I'm not sure that movie would have faced the same fate. It could have been finished because just 5 years later, a similar technique was used to give closure to Oliver Reed's character in Gladiator when he died unexpectedly, also of a heart attack, in the midst of filming that with about 3 weeks left to go. The filmmakers Ridley Scott re-edited the story, placed doubles in shadow, CG onto the head of the man in post-production, and today the tricks have only gotten more sophisticated, but the same premise, the same sort of techniques are still at play. When Paul Walker died in a car crash in November, Fast and Furious 7 was underway and near completion, but again, not finished yet. He didn't die on set, but given that he did die in a fiery car collision, and the Fast movies are all about high-speed peril, there was a question. What do? Do you finish the movie? Do you finish it and include Walker in as much as you can? Do you remove him entirely, reshoot scenes, or do you just scrap that project and start over? Now we know the answer. Last week, Universal announced that Paul Walker's brothers would be filling in for him. They'll be stand-ins, just like they used 20 years ago for Candy. There's something emotional about the fact that it's his brothers, his relatives, his people standing in, helping the crew gather and finish this film. A film that is anticipated by the legions of fans of the Fast and Furious movies. So we know now what's going to happen there. They are going to use these stand-ins, his brothers, to fill in the blanks that Walker himself can't fill anymore. And at the same time, Lionsgate Films trying to figure out how to solve a similar problem with their Hunger Games finale, Mockingjay. How do you complete the handful of scenes that Philip Seymour Hoffman left incomplete when he died in February? These days, the technology has become far, far more sophisticated than the Wagons East days. There are all sorts of options available, and still pioneering work is being done to bring actors who are no longer alive back to life, if only for a few minutes, if only for a few scenes on screen. I spoke with Jeffrey Okun, the chairman of the Visual Effects Society and a pioneer in digital wizardry whose films include Stargate, The Last Samurai, and Blood Diamond. I wanted to know, where do things stand now? What is the state of the art? Can movie magic bring an actor back from the dead?
So
His
if you
answer,
have a
maybe.
scan of an actor, a high-quality scan, can you basically create a simulation of that actor that's photoreal, or are there still limitations to that?
Well, there's always limitations, and this is where the artistry and talent of the artists come in. Because what you're effectively doing is, if you're going to create somebody for a movie who isn't dead, you'll go in and you'll mocap them and you'll scan them and you'll get textures on them. They effectively end up animating themselves, and then you have a voice take, and you have reference footage of them recording the voice so that you can go in and tweak the face, whatever you got to do to make it look photorealistic and like the actor. Then it starts to get a little more challenging when you don't have all those elements. So then footage, you can have the scan and the texture, but then you got to need reference footage to pick up the characteristics of how they moved, how they walked, the body language that they used. You need actors involved, good, knowledgeable actors that can help you understand how much of that is the actor and how much of that is the character the actor's playing, because, there are some actors that have quite a wide range, like Philip Seymour Hoffman and, actors, where they're different in every film. Dustin Hoffman and De Niro in the older days, so that it's hard to find the actor in the acting. They disappear into the character. I guess Sean Penn's a good example of that. There's a lot of these things. So it becomes an animation issue at some point. When you're talking about a Fast and Furious, it's not so challenging because you have tons of reference footage in the actual situations. They're going to use the body double. I'm sure he was scanned. And they may stick the face on him. And then there's basic tricks that you can use too.
When it comes to replacing an actor who's passed away and is not available for all of those scans and that motion capture work that needs to be done, is there a consultation that happens between the visual effects department, the writer, the filmmaker, probably the studio too, where they say, okay, what is the best way to resolve this issue, of incompleteness for the film?
What's the process when we hit this stage? What there ends up being is a giant series of meetings between cinematographer, the director, the visual effects people, the casting people, the studio people, and the insurance people. And it becomes a giant sorting issue. The first question that's always asked is, should we continue to make the film or cancel it and take our insurance payout on it? And the insurance company weighs in on that. And needless to say, the ability of the visual effects artists has changed the equation dramatically. Where once, if it happened, you're stuck with whatever you shot, and then it was a matter of how clever can we be? Can we find a body double and shoot everything over the shoulder or in wide shots or whatever it is? So, that's your first tool. Once you get past the insurance issue, then it becomes, let's see a cut of the movie, what's missing, what do we still need to shoot, what was scheduled to shoot, what can we do? Then, from my point of view, I sit there and offer up all the opportunities, regardless of costs or time involved. It's like, we can dig in, find a scan of them. If they don't have a scan, we can rebuild them based on the reference footage. We can hire, an actor to do an impersonation of them and do motion capture on that and drive the model that way. You can hire a look-alike actor, put them in there, we'll track their head and replace their head with a CG head. And so we don't have to make the whole body work, and it starts there and you work your way through, and then it becomes process of elimination. You're not going to settle with just one technique because you have to think of it all like all of visual effects, like a magic trick. You don't want to do it the same way every single time. Every time you see the actor, it'll be something a little different about the process that brought them there so that the audience doesn't catch on. So there's a lot of talking, a lot of, budgeting, a lot of scheduling, and then, you got to pull in the marketing department and the distribution people to find out how much time you really can have, how much money you really have to solve the problem. And then that sort of ends up dictating to you what's going on in terms of which solution you're going to find out. But another key issue that I see people ignoring all the time is it's not just a moral one, it's a business one, i.e., who owns the actor's likeness? And now do we have to renegotiate a new deal? Do we just get them? Do we have them under contract for this? And it gets really messy, and I'm pretty sure there's standard clauses inserted into contracts these days that cover this.
Basically, if you die in the midst of production, we have the right to use your likeness.
Yes. A lot of actors' performances are being changed because we can, and it's cheaper and easier, and the director, does things the actor may have refused to do because they felt their character would never do that. There's a lot of real dicey ground here. And then you get to the person died, and now we're going to do this, and now who owns the right to that performance? And how do you, visual effects people are very mindful of the fact that it's actors are artists, we're artists, and when we are called upon to do this, we try to channel the spirit of the actor and try to look at enough footage and have enough understanding of what their intentions were and try and, fulfill that. Obviously, we could never do it.
Right, you wouldn't want to deliver
the actor could.
You wouldn't want to recreate a performance that a bad performance, essentially, right? You wouldn't want to do something that the actor, or him or herself, wouldn't do.
Right, but that's subjective too. I've been involved in a case where I made an actress cry. She cried in take 7, but the director wanted take 2, but he wanted her to cry in 2, so we made her cry in 2, and she was upset. And SAG was upset, because that's, when you begin to fool around with that, we approach the uncanny valley where you,
right.
Change something about what's real, and the audience may not be able to go, oh, that's phony, but sometimes they can sense it.
Mm-hmm. So
then it becomes all about ego between actors and directors and stuff like that. And it's a real minefield when you end up doing this kind of thing. There's so many considerations to take into account. The technical part's the easy part. And again, I use the word easy, not to mean it's easy, but by comparison to the morality of what you're doing and all this stuff, man, it's really, really a difficult thing. Any artist is difficult to deal with as it is. Artists trying to make other artists do things the artist didn't do to start off with gets crazifying. And when you have certain kinds of directors who, I hate to use the word digital savvy, but they consider themselves digital savvy, and they start going, well, I'll take the arm from take 3, I'll take the other arm from take 7, I like both legs from take 5, I like his eyes in take 1, but I don't, take his mouth from take 10. And we end up doing that kind of thing.
And it looks real?
Yeah, it's absolutely 100% real. The real question is that, what are you gaining by that? Is that because you have a lack of communication skills, or you've run out of time, or you don't have the patience? Is there a basic misunderstanding between the actor and the director? In a certain world, the olden days was kind of cool because actors had to act, directors had to direct, and what you shot was what you got. And there's a little bit of a feeling of entitlement these days, specifically on, big action movies, where since hardly anything that you're shooting is going to be in the frame anyway, what difference does it make?
It seems like in the case of actors who die, often if it's something that happens early in the production, that role is simply recast. It's often in the case of, near the end of production, there were just a few scenes left to shoot where they will try to find this visual effects solution to it. How do you see it going forward? Will we get to the point someday where it's so easy to do it that it doesn't disrupt the film at all, or are we already there?
Well, no, it's always disruptive. Mm-hmm. You have to understand the difference between reality and the computer world. And the difference is quite simply, when you shoot reality, you get all this extra stuff for free. Mm-hmm. The wind blows, the actor's hair moves, if a fly happens to enter the frame, they'll blink. There's no way you can look at what an actor is doing and go, no, that's phony. His eyes aren't blinking simultaneously. But when you're in this digital world, you get nothing for free. Everything has to be calculated. Every hair blowing, every pimple, every pore has to be designed and put in. So it becomes a costly process.
That was Jeffrey Okun, chairman of the Visual Effects Society, talking about recreating actors who've passed away to help finish their final performance. But he also brought up another interesting point. This technology is being used to change the performances of actors who are still alive. In one famous case he mentioned, he substituted a tear onto the cheek of an actress. That was Jennifer Connelly in the film Blood Diamond, kind of famous case from a few years ago that caused a lot of discussion about where the performance ends in terms of the actor and where it begins in terms of the visual effects artist who's at a computer somewhere months later changing what you performed in front of the camera. It's one thing to recreate an actor who's died. It's another to change one who is still with us. Stay tuned.